Nostalgia can be a seductive force, making us think that older things are better than newer things, even when they're not. Sure, sometimes older things really are better, but often there's a reason we left them in the past. Look around the world of audio and nostalgia is everywhere. Vinyl, tube amps, cassette players, and even CD players are all old technology given a new lease of life by nostalgia. Sometimes they have real sonic benefits like tube amps, sometimes it's pure nostalgia like cassettes. R2R DACs are a symptom of nostalgia. The first DACs ever made used R2R circuits, and they were quickly replaced by better technology as soon as it was available. There are a few reasons for that, not the least of which is the fact that getting the resistors to the right levels of tolerance to handle very small signals accurately was a huge challenge. But let's get back to nostalgia for a moment, because there's a form of nostalgia that we haven't discussed yet, and it's relevant to R2R DACs. Sometimes clever marketing people get their hands on a nostalgic idea, one that they know will tug at the heartstrings of consumers and drive extra sales. They take these nostalgic concepts and they repackage them for the modern masses. Sometimes this produces a modern version of something classic, like the Motorola Razr Plus. Other times, you get a Chrysler PT Cruiser. The LAiV Harmony DAC is attempting to deliver on the promise of nostalgia wrapped in modern technology. It offers a resistor ladder R2R DAC packaged in some of the most extraordinarily beautiful industrial design that I think I've ever come across in this hobby. And I don't just mean that it looks pretty. Whether it's the template for laying out the feet of the DAC, the control wheel and the button, or the elegant and clean interface. Everything about the Harmony DAC screams about a degree of care and thought in the design process that we rarely see in this world of fast-paced product releases and incessant product updates and new versions. It might be worth mentioning here that I'm not personally a fan of three-footed audio devices and that general design approach, but the satisfaction is undeniable when you use the little template to place the feet for the Harmony DAC on your bench, your cabinet, your rack. As one great example of the thought that's gone into designing the Harmony DAC, the placement of this dial up here isn't just for show and to be different. The idea of this is that when you're interacting with it, when you're pressing down on it as a button, it's not going to slide the DAC across the surface you've got it mounted on. Instead, it's very easy to turn the dial and then select the options that you want without ever moving the position of the DAC. And that means that all of your interactions and adjustments with the Harmony DAC can be made with confidence. But it's also important to note that the care and attention goes beyond the aesthetics and the user interface of the Harmony DAC. On the back, you've got all the normal connections, but you've also got I2S, probably the best connection option for digital audio in my experience. Not only that, but the menu lets you choose whether the DAC prioritizes the clocks in the source device of the I2S signal or if it uses its own. And so you can switch between the two and decide which one sounds better to your ears. On the inside of the DAC, there's also a great deal of care that's been paid to the exact layout of the modules. And I say modules because it is a modular design intended to allow for future upgradability and future replacement of parts if needed. So if there's ways to improve its performance in the future, you'll be able to buy some sort of add-on module and have it installed, or maybe even install it yourself. I'm not sure yet. All of those modules go inside a single piece of aluminium that's been machined out. And that's going to do all sorts of great things like shield it from noise, reduce resonance and vibration through the unit, which can affect sensitive electronic equipment. And so it's all been very carefully and thoughtfully put together. Finally, the resistor ladder R2R boards that do the decoding of the sound. Those have been very carefully made to ensure tolerances as low as 0.05% between the resistors. Those are the sorts of tolerances that were missing from early DAC designs. So let's hope we're looking at a Motorola Razr Plus here and not a PT Cruiser. Once I got to testing and listening to the Harmony DAC, things become a little bit more nuanced than the shine and the glow that I've talked about so far. That's not to say it doesn't sound good, it sounds excellent. It's spacious, smooth, refined, and detailed. There's nothing not to like about its sound if you're listening without being super critical. But to tell you everything that I think I can share with you about a DAC like this, I need to do more than just plug in a USB cable and take a listen. When swapping between the various input options for the Harmony DAC, it quickly became clear to me that I2S is the best option in terms of sound quality. It's nice that the USB, the coaxial and the optical all perform similarly, and they do perform well, but if you really want to hear what the Harmony is capable of, I2S is where it's at. Specifically, the Harmony soundstage increases, and the sense of detail, texture and resolution is a little bit better through I2S than the other inputs. I mentioned before that you can also choose which clock the DAC prioritizes, and in my playing around it happened to sound better to my ears from the Eversolo DMP A8 clock. That said, it was a little bit of a coin toss, so your mileage may vary. The key takeaway from this though is that if you are looking to buy the Harmony DAC, you probably want to pair it up with the source that delivers an I2S input. Again, that's not to say that the other inputs are bad, but let's jump now to some comparisons to start filling out the nuances of what I experienced with the Harmony DAC. One of the most obvious comparisons for the Harmony DAC for me was the recently received and soon to be reviewed Schiit Yggdrasil Plus More is Better version. And by the way, make sure you subscribe if you want to see my review of the Yggy. But connecting both of these DACs up to the Burson Voyager headphone amp and using the Focal Utopias as my headphones, I was feeding coaxial from the Eversolo DMP A8 into the Yggy and running optical into the Harmony. And off the bat, both of these DACs proved incredibly capable. The Yggy presents a sound that's just a little bit more forward than the Harmony, so the Harmony's a touch more laid back, a touch smoother, a touch richer. But interestingly, the Harmony is no less resolving. There wasn't a single detail that I could hear from the Yggy that I couldn't pick up simply and easily from the Harmony as well. It's just got a different tonal character, and that's it. So the Harmony delivers slightly more weight and presence through vocals and mid-range instruments, but beyond that, they're pretty much identical. Swapping over to I2S into the Harmony and keeping the coaxial into the Yggy because it doesn't actually have anything like I2S on the Yggy. Swapping over to the I2S though, the Harmony closes the gap a little bit in terms of tonality. Now whether you want to close that gap is a whole other question. You might want that slightly richer, warmer sound, but the key things to take away from this are that detail and resolution between these two remain much the same. The Harmony is still the slightly richer and slightly warmer sounding DAC, but it's a very, very close call between the two to the point that you wouldn't pick it blind, I don't think. There are some slight differences in the positioning and the staging of these. I think the Harmony might deliver the slightly larger overall soundstage, particularly in I2S connections, but it's so close as to be largely irrelevant. If you were looking at both of these DACs, I would recommend buying the one you like the look of, you like the brand of, and or that you like the input selections that it gives you. Because realistically, unless you have them side by side and are switching between the two, you'll never know the difference and both sound fantastic. And this all started to put everything back into perspective for me with the Harmony. I think I came into this expecting it to absolutely blow me away. I'd heard some rave reviews, I'd heard a bit of hype around this DAC, and I almost expected it to be the best thing I'd ever heard. And so when I first listened in isolation, I thought it was nice, but it didn't rock my world. However, when I put it up against the Yggy, what it really showed me in context was that for the money you're spending on the Harmony, you're getting an astoundingly beautiful DAC. And I mean that in every sense. It sounds beautiful, it looks beautiful, it's beautiful to interact with, it's just wonderful. For $2,700 there is a huge amount to like about the Harmony DAC. I reviewed the more expensive Hollow Audio Spring KTE DAC back when its hype train was a runaway on a downhill track. And back then, I felt like the original Schiit Audio Yggdrasil DAC outperformed the Spring for way less money. And now we've got the Harmony DAC here, which cost about the same as the Yggdrasil, is a beautiful design, has a beautiful interface, a lovely remote control, I2S, and performs just as well. Suddenly, the Harmony was really stacking up. Now, if you do want to know where I think the Yggy might be preferable still, make sure you subscribe. I'll cover all of that off in my separate review of the Yggy. But the point of all this is to say that, based on the past comparisons and the current context, the Harmony to me is probably a better DAC than the Hollow Audio Spring, and I know many people out there love the Hollow Audio Spring. I just think the Harmony and the Yggys are all better value. While I was playing around, I also figured it would be worth comparing the Harmony DAC with the recently reviewed Listening M1 from Dethonray. That's priced somewhat similarly, but it offers you not just a DAC, but also a headphone amp built in. The Listening M1 offers less inputs, it doesn't have XLR outputs, it's got a headphone amp and Bluetooth and stuff instead, but they're both premium products operating in a somewhat similar space. That said, the Harmony DAC is clearly the better DAC, as it should be, because it's only got one job to do. The Harmony brings greater detail, resolution, and soundstage space to the sound, and the M1 comes across a little bit thicker through the center of the image. Sounds like Mark Knopfler fingerpicking on a guitar sound a bit less articulate from the M1 when compared to something like the Harmony. And that's with the Harmony in oversampling mode and fed via I2S to give it the best possible chance, because why not? The M1 is still a brilliant product for what it is, what it costs and what it offers, but the Harmony as a pure DAC is clearly better, as it should be. Now, just a second ago, I mentioned oversampling mode, which the Harmony DAC offers both non-oversampling or NOS and oversampling or OS modes. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. As you'd expect from the name, non-oversampling mode takes whatever you're giving to the Harmony and just spits it out as an analog signal without any fussing, any fiddling. If you switch on the oversampling mode, it's going to take whatever you send into the DAC and upsample it either to 705.6 or 768 kHz, and that's depending on the base sample rate of whatever's coming in. Switching between the two modes, the NOS mode comes across a bit smoother, a little bit less textured in the upper registers, and the soundstage is also a little bit narrower in NOS mode. You get less overall sense of space. However, those that enjoy a slightly more analog sound will probably enjoy the richer and smoother tonality and character that NOS mode brings. For me though, oversampling mode is clearly my preference, and that's because to my ears, you don't lose anything in oversampling mode. It doesn't get harsh or fatiguing or unnatural in any way. You just gain a bit more insight, better imaging, and a bit more texture and space. So regardless of the mode that you choose, the Harmony is always going to give you a rich and natural tonal character, not thick or warm, but just a little bit richer than some of the other DACs out there on the market. What's particularly cool about having a NOS mode though, is that if you want to pair the Harmony up with an oversampling solution like HQ Player, you can really get the most out of it that way. If you're not familiar with HQ Player, I've got a full video about it, how it's set up, what it does, etc. I'll link that in the description down below. But all you need to know for this is that using HQ Player with the Harmony DAC and its NOS mode allows for a lot of customization in the sound, the character and the presentation that you can get out of the Harmony. With HQ Player engaged within your signal chain, you can get a greater sense of soundstage size, more resolution, more detail, whilst always maintaining the beautiful tonal character that the Harmony delivers. In fact, if you own or you're going to buy a Harmony DAC, I would highly recommend considering adding HQ Player to your signal path. With HQ Player in the chain, to me the Harmony DAC pulled well ahead of the Schiit Yggdrasil Plus. The Schiit Yggy Plus is limited in terms of its ability to take an input from HQ Player because it doesn't handle super high sample rates, whereas the Harmony DAC does. And so in that configuration with HQ Player into the Harmony DAC, you've got yourself a truly fantastic setup. So after a little bit of a roller coaster ride that was set up somewhat from the expectations and the hype that I'd heard around the net about the Harmony DAC, I've landed at a place where I'm incredibly impressed and thoroughly enjoy interacting with the Harmony. This DAC is way more than a pretty face. It offers spectacular design, an enjoyable user interface, and sound quality that scales from very, very good to outstanding, depending on what you're feeding it with. And so if that sounds good to you and you want to know more, you can click the links below to go and learn more about the Harmony DAC. And as always, of course, I want to say a huge thanks to channel members, to Patreon members, and to those of you that leave super thanks here on the videos. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to learn more about another really interesting high-end DAC, I've linked another review up here that I think you'll really enjoy. For now though, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.